I think these high value, low price clubs, especially some of the franchise models, are really the ones for us to look at and go, wow, you guys are going to have an amazing next 12 to 24 months.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Krissy Vann. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. If you're an operator thinking about where smart capital should flow, what trends to follow, and how international markets are shaping the future of fitness, this one's for you. On this episode of the ATFW podcast, I'm joined by Ross Campbell, founder and CEO of Beyond Activ, for a conversation on the global fitness ecosystem. We'll dig into what's working region by region, from healthcare integration and AI innovation to franchise expansion and boutique evolution. We'll also take a look ahead to what you can expect at Beyond Activ Americas in Dallas, and the one shift Ross believes most operators are still underestimating as we move toward 2026. Before we get to it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. I'm your host, Krissy Vann, and this is ATFW. I'm so thrilled to have Ross Campbell joining me back on ATFW. Good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Krissy. Great to be back, and I really appreciate you taking the invitation to join me. Thank you so much.
Well, one of the things that I appreciate so much is that you have such a great pulse on what's happening globally. And I think a lot of people would agree that 2025 is proving a very interesting year for the industry. The last couple of years have been about the comeback story, and now it seems as though things are accelerating at a fever pitch. Not only are we seeing an increase in a ton of M&A activity, a lot of global expansion happening, and that intersection between healthcare, health club was really a topic of conversation. And now we're seeing that steamroll in real time. So I know that you do events around the globe. What are some of the conversations that are dominating in the now at the sessions that you're holding?
Yeah, great question, Krissy. I think overall, it's definitely a market with confidence. There's a lot of optimism. I think that's coming across in multiple levels, especially from operators and suppliers. And last but not least, and also most importantly, investors. They've had a very good couple of quarters, last couple of years. They're buoyed. They have capital. They want to put that to work. And so overall across the world, as you mentioned, we're seeing deals, both at a corporate level and an asset level. And people are trying to grab space to make sure they're reaching those growth targets. So overall, I think globally, we're definitely in a much more buoyant sector. I think to your point, and we'll dig into this later on, I'm excited to do so. I think there's definitely areas in some geographies that are sparkling hotter than others. But overall, net, very positive.
Well, you kind of led me right into that because we see that the appetite is there. I mean, obviously, I'm based in Canada. My neighbors to the US. I'm seeing announcement after announcement. But when we look at specific regions or segments, where is that extra excitement over M&A activity bubbling up right now?
Look, I think it's where the capital is. And I think it's where the capital has been proven to be put to use. And it's done very well. No more so than in the US. I think the US is a very strong 22, 23, even 24. We saw deals coming in there towards the back end of the year. And I think that is just accelerated, like you say. Where is that being put to use? Well, really, it's a lot in the franchise space. A little bit less so in the boutiques, but certainly now in the high value, low price space. There's been a lot of activity now with Planet Fitness and Crunch, a whole range of these large scale operators. Investors are in there already from day one. They're seeing their returns and they're doubling down into that marketplace, Krissy. So for me personally, I think in the US, a little bit less in the boutiques, but in the high value, low price, that multi-unit economics is really working well. Wow, what a unit to be in.
Well, when it comes to boutiques, because I know we're going to dive in a little later, but since you brought them up, why do you think that there is a little less momentum in that space? And if there are operators out there that were looking to scale, potentially make an exit someday, where should their focus be right now to be a standout amongst, I don't want to say noise, but there is a lot of competition in that market?
You hit the nail on the head. It's competition. I think there's been a lot of franchisors in the boutique space that have done very, very well in the last 10 years. I think coming from Australia, you saw a huge spur of those coming now. F45, of course, one of the biggest ones in the marketplace. They grew into America and they did very well for the first few years. But then, of course, they hit that roadblock through COVID. I think when it comes to boutiques, it depends upon the trend of the modality they're currently in. I think, obviously, Strength and conditioning, high intensity training was big, but it started to pull back a little bit. And naturally, Pilates are seeing some big takeoffs there. But again, high costs, high rent, high competition is really having those kind of headwinds against the boutiques. In addition, and all credit to them, I think the traditional big box and the health club have had a very, very impressive last couple of years. They've really adopted this holistic solution to health and wellness. They're bringing in recovery, they're bringing in longevity, they're bringing in sport, play, action, and they're hitting all those demographic points. And so for me, I think not only high cost, high labor, high competition on the boutique side, but they're coming up against the kind of renaissance of the larger health club.
Yeah, I've even seen that play out in real time here in Vancouver. I won't name names, but I'm part of a gym chain that essentially has done exactly that. They put everything under their one umbrella. And I remember when they first opened and I saw what my cost was per month. I was very curious. In a high Vancouver market, real estate is very expensive. And all I thought is, who is going to survive in this radius on the boutique side? Because if they had any pain points exposed, the pressure on them would have been exponential. And we have seen a lot of closures as a result of it. And I don't think that HVLP or any of those traditional models are going to slow down on building out those holistic elements. So, on that note, growth, innovation, that's a little bit the name of the game. I mean, we have our tried, tested, and trues that we need in our gym spaces. But when you look around, and I really want to dig on your brain on this because I know you have events that you do in UAE, in through Asia. So what are you seeing that's innovative in the space right now that you think is less of a trend and more would be a standout or something that people need to institute into their facilities if they really want to stand out?
Look, I think wellness, longevity, recovery have been there for quite some time. I think there's some companies that are doing especially well. If I was to take it geography first, Krissy, I think coming all the way over east, Australia is quite a small marketplace, but in terms of growth in the past couple of years, it's done exceptionally well. Not only that, I think it's also saw fitness franchising flourish. It's also saw wellness franchising come into the mix as well. And so for Australia, for such a small marketplace, it's actually packs a lot of growth potential in there for a lot of franchisors, and they're doing really well there. There's currently 70 plus franchisors in Australia nailing their trade down in the marketplace. Again, for a country of only 30 million, that's a phenomenally deep marketplace, although it's quite small. In terms of moving into Asia, Indonesia is a market and Philippines is a market that's definitely kind of had fast exponential growth in the last couple of years. I think maybe more so in the kind of budget end of the gyms, but I think they're really kind of penetrating into that lower level of the triangle. And so for me, Indonesia and Philippines and Asia are two hot tickets in town. Moving into the Middle East, Saudi Arabia has been the hottest ticket for the last couple of years, and it continues to be the main engine of growth when it comes to the region. Lots of interest in building some big, big brands there. Of course, Lijam, Kun Sports, Pure Gym, Gym Nation, all in there. All again, with respect to your earlier comment, growth ambitions, no interest in slowing down. In towards North America, I mean, the US has always been a market in its own. It's always amazed me, blown my mind to see how much innovation is actually in there. You lead the way, or so the US leads the way when it comes to wellness franchising. It leads the way when it comes to GLP-1s. It leads the way when it comes to, I would say, holistic healthcare, spa, and wellness. And so for me, although I'm deep in all these global markets, Krissy, for me, the major gem in the whole global market remains to be the US in terms of innovation, in terms of product, in terms of scale, in terms of demand for consumer, in terms of the risk appetite for investors to push money behind these products. The US is still far and away number one.
Two follow-up questions from that, because obviously you did mention Saudi and the growth that we've seen there. I understand, or what it appears is that public policy is very in favor of being health conscious and getting people moving. Whereas we saw in the States again this year, HFA was advocating, and I know this is the same old song and dance year over year, but it seemed more hopeful than it ever had been and didn't quite work out. So how helpful is it in a destination like Saudi versus the US to have government policy really encouraging people using exercise as medicine essentially and as a preventative healthcare tool?
Look, it's essential. Look, I think if you take Saudi as an example, and it's a great one to pull up, Krissy, I think MBS, the Crown Prince there, has had a huge initiative behind him for preventative health, for sport for all of Saudis, and of course to try and increase the penetration rate in the Saudi marketplace. Not only is he wanting healthy nutrition, healthy behaviors, he's actively trying to get more people into the gym. Now, that's coming from a royalty level at the very top level. And I think once you have that pushing down, everyone from above wants to try and reach up and help that country achieve those goals. It's a fantastic initiative I think MBS has done. But again, to your point, it's very difficult to see how that's replicated across the world. Singapore had a couple of healthy initiatives where it's trying to integrate healthcare into preventative health. There's an initiative on the table called Healthier SG. And what they're trying to do is get doctors to prescribe you actually physical activity, prescribe you recovery, prescribe you yoga, walking, nutrition, not just your traditional pharmaceuticals. So there are countries doing this, but again, they're quite small countries. Their governments have quite a large control over the population.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result, one of the positives is if they push something down hard, it does work. So Saudi, to their credit, have done a great job of initiating this. I think at the moment, Saudi gym penetration, having only been 2% about 5 or 6 years ago, is already up to about 6 or 7%. And its goal is to be up to 9 or 10% in the next couple of years. That's very big step jumps from a country that's quite immature and quite underdeveloped in its fitness and wellness journey. But again, it shows the what I always call the triangle: government, industry, investment. If you have that triangle, you can go places very fast.
Yeah, without question. And I mean, evidenced by those percentage leaps there. The second point that I was curious to elaborate on when you took us through that global breakthrough is the mention of GLP-1s. I actually was just speaking with Al Nashervani yesterday, who just hosted an event in the UK. And one of the things that he had expressed is that the adoption there is obviously not the same as what we're seeing here in the States and Canada. And my point that I said back, that makes perfect sense. Anytime I hop the border to the States, I am astounded at the level of pharmaceutical ads. So it makes sense why there's such an adoption. But on top of that, what I'm seeing play out in real time with GLP-1s that I think is really cool for the industry is how excited users are about being on them. I think it started out that there was almost no one wanted to really admit it and they were just going through a change. And now it's almost a sense of pride or status of saying, yeah, I'm on Ozempic. And that transition's happened very quickly. Botox took way longer to catch up, I think, in its origins. Everyone was just magically wrinkle free. And then now it's part of our regular maintenance routine. So when it comes to GLP-1s, I mean, you said there, longevity, it's such a space. We're seeing so much opportunity for fitness facilities, but globally, how do you see this playing out? What do you think is the next market that would have the biggest penetration of GLP-1 users and subsequently opportunity for operators? And are operators globally really thinking about this? Because I think the States is such a great test case.
Look, the test case is there and the States is the guinea pig. And I think every other country is looking on in terms of regulation, impact, and downstream outcomes for society. I think it does depend, as you naturally could think, Krissy, on the overall national structure of their health system, whether it's public or private, whether insurance is in there. And then, of course, you've got a whole stray of regulation behind that. It is true, the US is the UK is very much a healthcare system that's publicly led, so it's publicly funded. As a result, you're probably not going to get high cost medicines and treatments like GLP-1s getting given away to the general public as they currently stand at their current economic cost. That being said, as they get larger and proliferate more and become smaller in cost, you might get these kind of nations starting to adopt these in for general medicine and general preventative health. But I think probably what you're going to end up finding is going to go more into the affluent countries where the regulations aren't perhaps as strict and you have a larger private healthcare system with a larger private health insurance system. So, for example, Saudi Arabia will have this soon. It does have a large private health system, but also has a lot of private healthcare and very rich, affluent people that can afford this. I think in Asia, Indonesia, Thailand, you're also seeing this in these countries where they have wealth, they have private healthcare insurance, they have private healthcare industries, and you also have medical tourism industries. As a result, you're seeing GLP-1s being deployed there, often not by commercial gym chains, but actually often by the hospitals themselves to try and make sure that patients are better there. India has just actually opened up as well to GLP-1s. And again, a huge continent of 1.6 billion people. But again, it only takes a small fraction of those to make sure it's a commercial success. I do think it's not on every gym operator's mind or playbook at this moment in time. I do think for some gym operators, scale is important. I think you have to have a large scale gym operation to try and understand if you can not only understand the dynamics of GLP-1s, if you can produce a concept, if you can commercialize that, execute that, and then roll it out across your different locations. That's not for every single operator. So where I think GLP-1s will win, just like they have done in the States, is large scale operators owning that process, taking it in-house, and really being able to deliver that to their members. Otherwise, smaller operators will no doubt have to kind of partner with third-party operators. That third-party operatorship might not be enough of a commercial success or enough of a commercial reason to really chase that down the rabbit hole. So honestly, it's not quite there yet, I think, GLP-1s globally, but it's a very, very interesting dynamic, but more so in the US than anywhere else.
Yeah, and I know that, I mean, there's studies coming out weekly, so we're in a real-time learning phase, but I do think the shift, particularly here in North America, I think the conversation from the consumer around it is a really fascinating one to watch because at the end of the day, we follow their lead essentially, and the industry set itself up in the right way to be at least in the arena of the conversation. Whether that translates to dollars and cents down the road, to your point, it's yet to be seen how that all plays out. As we look ahead, though, one of the other conversations that dominated every single conference last year, and I think we're banging our heads against the wall at this point, is AI, personalization, and what it could mean for member retention. It feels buzzy. So I'm curious, when we get a little bit more granular, what are the actual conversations that are happening around this? Because at this point, there's a ton of operators that have implemented new tools into their tech stack. But where is the highest value? What are people actually genuinely excited about that's moving the ROI?
Honestly, I think it's still a little bit up in the air at the moment in time. I think on the tech space, on the tech stack space, I think you're seeing everyone from wearables to member management systems to CSM systems to databases, lead generation systems, contact systems, bots for communications. They're actually all pretty much in experimental levels across some of the operators. Yes, they're having good success rates. I think the technology companies themselves, and there are plenty out there now that are selling themselves as AI enabled, AI first, are having some great success in having those conversations. But again, I think time is to be told on who the market leaders are and exactly where they are. I think at the moment in time, what's it being used for? I don't think content generation for marketing is quite being exploited to its highest potential just yet. I think financial reports and summaries certainly are. Fitness programming for both the coaches and the individual, both through the app, whether that's a third-party app or a gym app, certainly are using that AI. I think for lead generation, there's some really good steps coming on board when it comes to understanding how to communicate to your members 24/7. And then, of course, chatbots are also coming into the mix now as well. And I think they're having some really good success. But overall, I couldn't point to maybe 4 or 5 specific companies that are really dominating the market. It's a real gold rush, which is very, very exciting, I think, for everyone to see. And in terms of, some people that are doing this from the start, one of the companies you're following from the UAE is Gym Nation. They were heavy adopters of AI for the last 12 to 18 months, making some really, really good strides in how they're actually implicating that into there for retention gains, for engagement gains, for sale of personal training, and also launches of new sites, which are undergoing quite frequently at the moment in Saudi Arabia. So there are really positive case studies of how it's being put to good use. But again, it's a gold rush. And I think everyone is looking at everyone else and figuring out what's working and what's not working. But again, net, all very positive.
Well, you kind of highlight it right there, people gathering together to discuss what's working and what's not working. Very shortly, we're going to hear more about Beyond Activ Dallas because that's going to be here before we know it and a prime destination to have those conversations. But as we've been chatting here, we've covered a couple of streams, the longevity element, the GLP-1 element, this gold rush around SaaS companies that are looking to embrace AI, help operators integrate it. And we initiated the entire conversation talking about the fact, yes, there's a lot of M&A, but when it comes to smart capital in the industry, where do you feel right now it should go in regards to the global fitness ecosystem, or where do you see the most excitement in regards to investments?
Yeah, look, I think great question. Oh, if I had some money, More money. I've had some money. Where would I put it? Look, I think the franchise market has been the engine of growth for the last 2 or 3 years. And to your point, I just don't see that slowing down, Krissy, in the next couple of years. I think probably more so, again, economies of scale. You have these companies like Purpose Brands that have got no shortage of growth opportunity. I'm really interested to see what they do next. Planet Fitness as they expand internationally, Crunch Fitness as they expand internationally, Snap Fitness again as they expand internationally. And we're not looking at just 10, 15 sites a year. We're looking at companies that are trying to build 100, 200, 300 new club sites across the year. SmartFit in Brazil now, I think, is up to 1,700 clubs and growing at a pace of about 300 new clubs a year. That growth is unbelievable. Basic Fit as well, I think, was 200 plus clubs in the last couple of years alone. So you've got these clubs who are on an absolute tear. So for me, I think these high value, low price clubs, especially some of the franchise models, are really the ones for us to look at and go, wow, you guys are going to have an amazing next 12 to 24 months. On the technology side, I think it's very interesting to see wearables make a bit of a step change in the last couple of maybe quarters. Obviously, Aura has some great partnerships that raised a lot more money. In addition, then you saw Whoop coming out with the 5.0. I'm currently wearing the 4.0. I haven't quite updated myself yet. I promise to do that. But again, you're starting to see these step changes in features and technologies that are now running out across their platforms. Very, very interesting. The use of glucose monitoring as well is another one that's fast up and coming. ECG monitoring on Whoop. The aspect of health span and lifespan inside your wearable. Apple itself is also making some step changes when it comes to wearables. So for me, I think wearables maybe in 22, 23 suffered a little bit of feature burnout. Aesthetically very pleasing. We all got to a point that were relatively similar, but in the last couple of quarters, last couple of months, we'll really see some companies trying to step up there. So on that space, I think that's very, very interesting. One of the other interesting ones I think that we're looking at, Krissy, is not just the kind of high value, low price, large scale fitness franchises. Wellness franchising, I think, is taking a really interesting space in the last couple of years. And again, you're seeing the cryo, the infrared, the flotation tanks, the stretch therapy, all with some really, really interesting growth, not just in the US alone, but also internationally. So for me, wellness franchising, where it's actually very uncompetitive compared to fitness franchising, I think it's going to have a very next good 1 or 2 years.
Where do you think in that wellness sector? I mean, you highlighted a couple of modalities there, but what has been kind of creating the winning franchise model in that space? Is it niching into one modality, or, I mean, what does the experience have to be to have that broad appeal that can grow at scale? And will that have longevity? Because there could be an argument that some of those modalities, and we see it happen all the time, may feel more like a trend versus what somebody decides to institute as a sustainable lifestyle long term.
Great question. I think this comes down to who the future consumer is. I think for us, I think there's a huge real estate grab now on trying to gain the attention of Gen Y and Gen Z, as you should do, right? They're buying multiple memberships. They're spending a lot more money on fitness and wellness. But for me personally, the dark horse in the marketplace at the moment is those that are 40 and above. Those that are relatively well active, that want to spend more money, have more disposable income on their fitness and wellness, might not necessarily spend a lot of money on a Planet Fitness membership, but they might buy a Whoop. They might go and buy a Restore membership. They might buy a Drip Bar membership to try and make sure they're really getting that kind of high press wellness experience into there. I think that aging or older wellness consumer, I think, is going to make sure these wellness franchises propel themselves forward. Don't get me wrong, I don't know if there's a market leader per se. There's some great cryo franchises. There's some great infrared sauna and heat contrast, hot cold contrast ones, flotation tank. I haven't quite saw one that encapsulates it all just yet. I was up at Mothership in New York last year. It is an absolutely phenomenal experience.
I love it.
Unbelievable. But we're not going to see 100 of those across the world in the next couple of years. So what are we going to see? Again, probably good unit economic, highly scalable, quite niche, but quite affordable prospects for someone to put in a few infrared saunas, a few communal ice baths, a few communal magnesium baths, and you've got communal bathing. And I think that communal bathing aspect is something we're starting to see a lot more of as well. So for me, wellness, play, nature, all these things I want to see more of in 2026.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because obviously, again, we look to the States and they're leaders for sure when it comes to adopting these. But what would be the market that's coming up on their heels from this wellness franchise side of things? Where else is seeing that same appetite for I kind of think of it from the social media perspective because even conversations around mental health and things like that, like it's almost become trendy to be like, I'm burnt out and I need to make space for my wellness, which is excellent for us. So who else is kind of seeing the consumer embrace that in the same way?
I would have to think, honestly, Australia has got an
Mm.
enormously mature marketplace when it comes to consumers experimenting with fitness and wellness. In terms of the adoption of wellness facilities, you've got world-class wellness facilities, private clubs. St. Haven in Melbourne is a world-class private members club that focuses on wellness. You've got a number of really wellness-focused health clubs like Total Fusion, One Playground coming in there as well, doing amazing work. You've also got City Cave, who are a franchise of 50 over facilities that focus on flotation pods. So then you have Bath House, and then you also have hot and cold contrast therapy. So for me, Australia is a melting pot. It's a test bed for all these different concepts to try and be born. That being said, as these small boutiques are popping up with these amazing services, what you are seeing naturally is some of these larger, well-capitalized, ambitious, nimble health clubs coming in and saying, actually, we can also take this. And actually, we can also do this. And so again, it's raising the bar again on these traditional health clubs in Australia to become holistic health centers for their members. And again, I think that's an amazing uptake for everyone in the Australian community. So for me, Australia is a fascinating market to watch.
Yeah, and it's interesting exactly that. The big players, it's a great upsell for their services, or if they want to just make it part of the package, it's kind of easy to do once you have the equipment. It's gonna pay for itself based on recurring revenue. And if you are one of these independents, you really have to build a following and a community, I think, to survive in the long term because of that. Like that footprint that's coming in. And I think because of M&A and things getting bigger, if you have endless disposable capital, you're just going to be able to blow them out of the water. So it's kind of interesting to watch. As we look ahead, though, we kind of covered how we go to events and the conversations generally focus on the topics du jour. But if you had a crystal ball looking ahead, what are the elements that operators should be talking about right now that they're perhaps underestimating, or even more so, it's just not on the radar?
I think going back to an earlier point I raised, Chrissy, I think probably one of the things that's maybe a little bit underlooked is the amount of potential consumers and the amount of potential revenue you can get from the over 40s. And I think there's a huge treasure trove there of people in the marketplace that are underserved, that perhaps don't really fit into some of the kind of more edgier gym chains that are popping up. And some of these chains are absolutely fantastic. But I mean, they're geared for the influencer crowd, the Instagram crowd, the TikTok crowd. The Group X certainly is. And I think that is a highly profitable model. But I think at some points, products and services have to be built and catered for the older generation who have candidly much more of an interest in not dying sooner than the younger people are, and will want to put that money to use. So I reckon at some point someone's going to hit the jackpot with understanding how they can create services or products, whether that is independently owned or franchise or some type of joint venture. I think for me that's a very interesting segment. I know it's been brought up in a couple of podcasts recently where people have been talking about, what is the next chapter for our marketplace, and that might be something we don't know about. It's going to come from someone outside the industry who doesn't really understand our industry, but it's going to build a product that's going to completely disrupt what we're actually doing traditionally. And I think there's that element in the background of who is building what that we don't know about. I mean, Apple, for example, its market cap is larger than the entire fitness market globally combined. If it really wanted to put down something, it could build something that could really overtake the entire global fitness market from a research and development standpoint. So you've got these huge, huge companies that if they actually put their money to worth, they could probably disrupt the market as much as anything. Thankfully, however, they're trying to disrupt healthcare first and not necessarily fitness. as its smaller cousin. So I'm interested to see what these companies build next, how they engage next. But I think competition will come from a whole different array of elements. Some we know and some we don't know at the moment in time. But for me, for those that are focusing on the different demographics, the older generations, I think there's reward there.
Yeah, I think the part that's nice though is at events where everyone's collaborating, that broader lens is already on. I mean, even in my short time working in the B2B side of this industry and the dozens upon dozens of interviews that I've done, it's interesting to hear the conversation shift in real time and really understand where leaders' focus is going. I also have to hand it to you. I think that's one of my favorite quotes. Candidly, they have more interest in not dying than the other group. No better way to say it.
It's
I
good.
loved it.
That is it. Yeah.
It is very true. Well, one of the other things that is true is that a lot of industry leaders have an event on their calendar coming up this fall. Beyond Activ debuted in New York last year and this year traveling to Dallas. So tell me about the event, who's speaking, what can people expect, and maybe a little bit elaborate on some learnings you had hosting the event in the Americas that you're going to take into this event and perhaps change things up a bit.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it just points to our entire conversation we've had, Krissy. I think when it comes to looking at the very front edge, the coal face of our industry, I think there's no better place to come than the US to do that. I think some of the larger groups, whether it's Lifetime Planet, Equinox, I mean, I could go on and on. Some of these companies are doing just unbelievable work at creating new service menus for their members, whether that's pickleball, paddle, GLP-1s, preventative health, physio, doctors. I mean, you name it. It's all going on inside these clubs. And so I think from our perspective, coming to the US is a very, very easy decision for us. In addition, we've got a number of clients from across the world also want access to the US market. They're trying to learn, they're trying to do business there. So what did we learn last year? Everyone wants to come to the US. Everyone wants to do business in the US in some capacity. There's lots to learn, there's lots to know, and there's lots to show at the same time. Dallas for us is a very interesting market. I think, again, Texas is a state, lots of large population there, big sporting state, as you know. Actually, some really, really strong companies coming out of Dallas and Texas at the same time. Really strong connections into Latin America. So we're going to pull a lot more of our Latin American connections up for Mexico and Brazil. Also, two countries, Mexico and Brazil, that are doing some really interesting work when it comes to growing their health and fitness marketplace. In addition, not only that, in the US, we are blessed with having active investors and financiers, whether that's in the investment banking side, the private equity, the venture capital. This is the deepest pool of capital and investment anywhere in the world that's looking at health, fitness, and wellness. And again, we're going to bring them to Dallas in October and make sure they're exposed to the marketplace and make sure that we expose the marketplace to them in turn. We have to do a better job of engaging, enthusing, and convincing investors to invest more money into this sector. You love this sector. I love this sector. But we've all got a part to play to make sure that more investment comes into the sector.
Without question, I'm sure you've piqued people's appetite. And let's face it, the LinkedIn universe is doing its job itself because people are still sharing their experiences from last year. But if there is somebody that wants to learn more and make sure that they're taking part, where should they travel to? And remind people when the event is.
Yeah, certainly. Look, it's over the 2nd and 3rd of October in Dallas at the Hilton Anatole. It's a great hotel. In terms of speakers, we've got Mark Masteroff, the godfather of fitness himself, keynoting the first day on the 2nd of October. We've got Joe DeSena, again, the godfather of mass dissipation from Sparta, keynoting the second day. You can go to beyondactiv.com/events/Americas, Krissy, and all the information is there. We extend an invitation to all of your guests and members and listeners to come to the event. We've got a really interesting group of people. We've got the largest company from Germany coming over. We've got the largest company from Saudi Arabia coming over. We've got the largest company from India coming over. We've got the largest company from South Africa coming over. Again, all to share their experiences, but at the same time to connect with those in the US. So hopefully many of you will see you in Dallas in October.
Fabulous roster. The jet lag will be real for many, but without a doubt, well worth it. Ross Campbell, thank you so much for offering your insight for us today and letting us know what to expect, because we're halfway through July, which means October will be here before we know it.
Thanks, Krissy. And again, thanks for your service. All Things Fitness and Wellness is a great podcast. It's a great platform for everyone to learn and grow. I listen to it. My team does too. So from all of us, thank you for your service.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Krissy Vann. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.